I didn't
That'll
There was
give you a list of anything you haven't read.
Okay,
So are you?
perfect. That's better than
And if you want to change your preview, it's somewhere in your settings, but I haven't messed with mine.
PTSD,
Yes.
and I have more of an assistant schedule.
They want to change the ordinance?
I can't.
You think we can just put the shows we've been missing on Tuesday nights up there while we're doing this? Yeah, I think we could watch some baseball on
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City Council workshop for March 26, 2019. We'll start with public input. If there's anybody from the public that would like to address the council on anything that's not on the agenda this evening, you may do so. If you do, the council will not respond or reply to questions, but you are willing and able to bring anything to their attention that you would like to. So you'd have a 3-minute time limit. Is there anybody who would like to take advantage of that? Yes. Ma'am, if you could come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name's Karen Scoville, and I live on 706 Mulberry Avenue here in Laurel. We're on the east side of town. I am one of three, I should say 4 homeowners on that aisle. We're asking for to have the circle around Mulberry paved. I have spent about $500 on repairs on my car because it scrapes the underneath of my vehicle, and we need to have that road fixed. It's been in the agenda for so many years, and with the building of the machine shop that our neighbor is building, it's about 80% of his property. We also need probably thinking about widening that road of Mulberry. We have a lot of cars coming through there. My neighbor has 3 cars and one that's not working. And with the new business coming in, we may need some stretching out there. My neighbor across from me, directly across from me, he passed away without a will. So that property is in limbo, and it's his daughter and his son is currently trying to own it. They've been promised it. We're not sure what's happening with that. They may help us with getting those containers out of there and some of those trees out of there, which would help us get through during the winter time. But we really do need that road between Mulberry and I think it's Locust on the other side, that one area. It's all mud. We've had cars stuck in the mud for so many years. It's a dream for somebody to go pull them out in the middle of the night. We've had that done for years. And we would like our city to consider on blacktopping it. Okay, it won't work with gravel. Gravel's been done. Rototilling's been done. And so I think if we put a pavement on there and a drainage to the ditch that's currently there, because we do have some holding water on Mulberry. So if you guys would pay attention and go out and look and see what's there, we have a lot of things to offer there, but I'm the last house down and we're getting pushed out. So please consider that. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
It'll be looked at and you'll be talked to. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to approach the council with any concerns, comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to appointments. So under appointments, we have the appointment of Ryan Sedgwick as Laurel City Police Officer. If I can get Ryan to come up, approach the podium, and I will introduce you. This is Ryan Sedgwick. The Police Chief Langby and Captain are both in Helena this week. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here. The chief wanted to be here to present Ryan. He has a letter, and I don't know if you have that or not, but Ryan has successfully completed all of his requirements that were set forth in his conditional job offer. Ryan was required to complete a comprehensive background investigation, psychological exam, medical exam, and a drug screen. Before Ryan was given a conditional job offer, he had to pass the Montana Testing Consortium testing. Ryan then passed the BPAT exam and then was interviewed by the police commission. The chief says he's looking forward to have Ryan Sedgwick be a member of his police department that he's very proud of, and I look forward to having Ryan as a new young officer on the police department out making a difference. And with that, I would like to know if there are any questions for the council to Mr. Sedgwick. Council Vice President McGee.
Yeah, I don't have a question for Ryan, but I would point out, Mayor, that Ryan's been a member of our police reserve force and served as the president of that organization as well.
That's correct. Is there anything else for Mr. Sedgwick? Next week, we'll bring you up in front of the council if they approve that appointment, which I am confident they will. We will have a pinning ceremony where we will stick you to sharp items. So, thank you very much. You can sit down or you can leave if you like.
All
So
right.
it's up to you.
I'll have to take off, but thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, just thank you for the opportunity, and hope to serve Laurel and the community here as well. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up under executive review is the resolution for the City Council authorizing the mayor to sign a contract with the Billings Family YMCA for the operation and management of the City of Laurel Municipal Pool. The contract that we enter into every year, as we have in the past 3 or 4 years now with the YMCA to operate the pool for us. And Kurt is, I think, here to present that. Unfortunately, the gentleman from the YMCA, is he here?
Made it here. Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor.
Last email I saw said he didn't think he could make it.
Yeah, well, he's here, so. Before you tonight, Council, we have the agreement with the Billings YMCA to operate in the management of the City of Laurel's municipal pool. What they do is they provide the management and the lifeguards that operate our swimming pool. They've been doing it for going on about 10 years now. So we asked, it's that time of year that they want to start putting out their program, their literature for the summer, get people to get on board in hiring and training. So Wayne Muller with YMCA reached out to me here about a month ago, and we're getting it before you tonight. So the contract is essentially the same as last year, and the price is exactly the same as last year. There's no rate increase over the management of that pool. It is for $45,600, which is the same as last year. So if you remember, council members that were here last year, it's exactly the same contract. So.
Any questions?
So I have Wayne here. If there's any questions the council would have of Wayne with the YMCA.
Councilmember Stokes?
Was there any reason that they go from the parks board first? Usually we have it go from the parks and then we'll come here.
Timing. We could have it at the Parks Board next Thursday, but it was one of those things that I didn't even think about, Scott. So if you want to bring it, yeah, I'm sorry for that.
I figured it was time.
Yeah. Yeah, when he emailed me and said we were trying to get their literature out, I thought it was time sensitive for them to start doing that. So.
Any other questions on the contract with the YMCA on the pool? Pool's ready to go, ready to open?
No, we haven't even started. With all the snow and the ice,
But I mean, there's no major work to it.
we got to look at some of the ladders that were rusting out. We've put in some stainless steel ladders in the past. We painted the bottom of the pool here 2 years ago. We've worked on the pumps. We've worked on the chlorinator. So the YMCA comes in about the week before, and they do the cleanup and get the building ready to go. And about a week before the pool opens, we fill it and start the pump and get it circulating. We started about a week in advance to try to get the water temperature up and also get the chlorine and the water balance up. So we've got to add chemicals to get it just right for human consumption, essentially. That water has to be crystal clear. It has to be the same water quality you would have coming out of your kitchen faucet, so that people that drink it while they're swimming they won't get ill. So, and it requires us to have Tim Ryder, Matt Wheeler, and myself are all certified pool operators. That is a requirement of this Department of Health, that we have certified pool operators within a half-hour time frame. So the city does have that 3 individuals that are certified to respond to that pool at any moment to help with the water quality. So.
Any other questions on the pool? Seeing none, then we will move on to item 3 under executive review is a resolution. It's a resolution R19-07. Resolution of the City Council authorizing the developer of Iron Horse Station subdivision to install a stormwater pond within dedicated parkland within the subdivision pursuant to Laurel Municipal Code 16.40.040. And we have a few people to help introduce that, including Public Works Director Kurt Markegard. I'll let him start.
Well, Mr. Mayor, council members, I believe this resolution was tabled. Council had questions about stormwater and where that is going in the city. And I guess we are here to find out what the council the concerns are with that, and the things that we have found since the council tabled the resolution. I did go up after the last week and review the area. Got my hands around it, what we're looking at, the parkland area. Try to get understanding what would happen if we allow a stormwater pond in the park area. So I did go up there, take some photographs, and I guess come back to this board and find out what those concerns are that you would have as far as going forward with this. I would have to say the way the resolution is written, it looks like you give 100% permission to give them construction and they can go forward with it, and I don't think that was the intent. The intent was to allow them to go forward with the design, get the permits necessary, and do all that, and before you would have a final approval. And I did talk to Colton tonight before that, and that was his understanding too. That was the mayor's understanding, so that this would give them permission to go forward with the design and try to acquire all the permits that they would need to have in order to build a stormwater pond in that area. So I do have some concerns that it may be in jurisdictional wetlands, the Army Corps of Engineers, and that is a whole other issue that they would have to look into. So. And I do have pictures of the area if council would like to see those. I think Brittany has those. And then the mayor wanted me to talk about what other communities do in stormwater, what they do, and I do have a picture on that as well as what other subdivisions do. But if you look at your screens, that picture there is depicted as cattails. That is right in the park area off of where the new road would go. And there's about the height of them. They're about 5 feet tall. That is in the dedicated parkland. That was in Iron Horse Phase 2, but it was in Iron Horse subdivision plat that was approved in 2005. That is an aerial from a drone. That is the south park. So delineated on there, there's 2 parks. One would on each side of the park. That one on the left of the screen on both ways is pretty much Russian olive trees. There's not a lot of wetlands in that area. It's just mostly Russian olive trees. So it's hard to see from Alder because it's so thick with trees. Next slide. That is looking up Alder Avenue, and you can see right off of it, right to the left at the bottom of the screen, that is all parkland dedication again. And you can see it looks like a deer trail and some water flowing through there. And then that's an overview of looking all the way out to the west, and you can see to the right is Cattails, and then to the left is where the Iron Horse subdivision phase 2 would be going. And the road would be going through that area. That's high. There again is another photo of that area, of just the one park to the north. And then there's Alder Avenue right there. That's at the intersection of Alder and Ridge Drive. Okay. There should be a Word document on somewhere on that. The Billings, right. And this is just a Google Earth screenshot that I threw into Word. But that is you may want to open the PDF. There you go. So that's a subdivision off of Grand Avenue, and although it's very small, there, if you can keep zooming in, you can see right on the south of those developments, there's a little stormwater brown pond right there. That would be a stormwater pond coming off of the roads. And then a little bit to the left there, Brittany, keep going to the left. Right there, back a little bit. Right there's another one. You can see there's stormwater ponds that come off these streets, and they're usually at the lower end of a street. So down gradient is where they would sit there and put these ponds. So essentially that's the same thing that Iron Horse is looking at on phase 2, is to come on the down gradient side and then storm a stormwater pond. But that's how subdivisions, as they're going in the future, are trying to mitigate stormwater. As the cities grow, you would put them in small detention ponds and either have a discharge to a storm drain eventually, or they don't go anywhere. They just evaporate off. And so he wanted me to look into that after last week's meeting, and I did. I looked into Billings and what they're doing. And then the other thing is, if you really wanted to look at citywide, you would put in citywide storm drains. Laurel is not real good about having storm drains in all the neighborhoods. There isn't a lot of storm drains. In fact, the East Laurel storm drain was put in, I think, in 1986 by a citywide bond. It went out for a vote of the people to install that, and it did. And that was to keep downtown from flooding and the east end of Laurel from flooding. And that end up, if you go out past Sid's, that's where that connects, that ditch along the road. That is where your stormwater pipe ends out, right at Sid's. And so then it goes out, turns left up Yard Office Road and goes into the Nutting Drain. There's other stormwater ponds or other stormwater drain system, crosses right behind the chamber. It goes over to Railroad Street, shoots over to Bernhardt Road, and then straight across to right in front of Walmart, across the interstate, and it opens up on a ditch south of there. And then that makes its way down to the river right by the water treatment plant. The south side goes down to Russell Park. It goes into a stormwater pipe, and that actually goes into one of the ditches that's right south of the refinery. And then that's where it goes. And Iron Horse first phase goes into stormwater ponds that you can see right off of East Maryland Road. There's some pits there that are full of pit run. And the water, just recently when the snow melted, water went in there and those were full just from the snow melt. So this isn't unheard of. The first phase has these stormwater ponds. Second phase, we do have the report for that, but it was supposed to be, second phase wasn't yet designed and developed. And so that's why we're here tonight. They want to design and develop it. And at the time, they talked about either putting it in detention ponds or into the Nutting Drain. And so looking at it when they went through the KLJ review, we want to know what they're going to do, stormwater ponds when they build the roads. So, and that's what their alternative is, what they presented to you. They would like to permission to go into that take a stormwater pond and put it in the down gradient spot and allow that. Back in 2005, that second phase wasn't fully designed out. There was no design. And so the city council approved the plat, not knowing exactly where all that stormwater would go at the time. So I guess I would be open for any questions. And Colton with Territorial Landworks is here too. He's the developer's representative, and he didn't get a chance to speak last week or 2 weeks ago. And so if the council has any questions for them, I would say, he's here and he can answer any questions about that and what their intent is.
Council President Eaton.
Yes, can I just back up for a minute? And I'm not familiar with what the process is. So we have Iron Horse subdivision, and it has, it's developed basically around Roundhouse Drive. But this phase two, none of this is in existence, right? The Great Northern Road, and then the cul-de-sac off of it, Short Line Drive, and then the, how Pennsylvania is angling off of it. None of that actually is in existence. None of that has been created. Is that correct?
My understanding, correct?
None of the public works and infrastructure has been installed, except there is a water line that connects the subdivision to first phase. It went from West 12th Street through some lots, and it's just on the very left, there's a water line in there, but no sewer and no streets. It is platted, and the plat was accepted in 2005.
Can we pull up that picture?
It's part of your packet.
Oh, never mind.
It should be in your Dropbox for tonight's agenda. It was in there. It was in the packet 2 weeks ago.
And then, so then I have another question. And I guess maybe I'm, okay, so everyone pretty much has this map here. Then are we talking about two parkland areas going into the second phase? A big one up in the corner, and then lot 10 is also in blue, says new proposed west end detention pond. So are we talking about two ponds, or are we talking about one pond?
Go ahead, Kurt.
The one pond, it was in dedicated parkland, so when you accepted the plat in 2005, they had to dedicate so much of the land to the city, or they have to pay cash in lieu. So the one pond on your right, that is parkland. That's what the question is before you tonight. The other one is on a lot 10. That is a proposed stormwater pond that is on private property, essentially. So part of the process would be to review that. That would be part of the street and design, stormwater design that we would review, and KLJ would then advise the city whether we accept that or not, but that is not in public park at this point.
I noticed there was other people that had
And
questions. so
Council
I'm
Vice
gonna
President
say-
McGee had a question.
Yeah, I'm wondering, don't we have the wrong resolution in front of us tonight? I'm very reluctant. Maybe it comes from years of feeling like I've been bamboozled.
We're going to address that too.
Because obviously this gives permission to construct and install stormwater ponds. And I'm very uncomfortable with that permission being granted when we don't have any idea. If you look around town here, there's a number of different stormwater ponds. Some of them have rock lining and they look very nice. Some of them are nothing but grass and weeds. Some of them are park that have actual grass. Sometimes it's usable, sometimes it's not because of what it retains. And then, of course, where this one is going, I want to be sure the element of public safety is addressed. Is this kind of pond, is it going to be so deep with so much water that it needs fencing around it to keep children out, keep things safe? Or is it just going to be like the other ponds that are around town, not so deep, except for this time of year, and don't seem to require fencing? It seems to me like the park board has a weigh-in on this and some say in its design and stuff, and I just feel like we're getting the cart before the horse with this resolution this evening if we authorize the construction and installation of the stormwater. And it's not even clear whether we're actually working with two ponds or we're working with one. Maybe that's to be determined by the final conclusion of the design and stuff that permission needs to be granted to go forward to. I'm very interested in giving the permission for it to go forward. Obviously, water has to be contained and it has to be controlled, and it has to be in this new subdivision development, but I'm very reluctant to authorize the construction and installation of these ponds or ponds with so many so many unanswered questions about design and how many we're talking about and what issues are going to be around it and whether the park board even likes what's taking place as an amenity in the park, if it's actually an amenity at all. So those are my concerns. So I don't know, Kurt, if you can address any of those or not, but that's where I'm at.
Well, the mayor had that discussion, we had that earlier, and your city attorney has a way, I think, that he can answer that question for you, if that's the council's concern, that the resolution wasn't written the way you would like. I believe Sam can address that.
Yeah, I guess we discussed it quickly, and my advice would be to do exactly what you're talking about. Take a step back and only authorize the design and authorize these folks to seek the required permits and then come back to the city council for final approval. If they're unable to get the permits, it'll be a moot issue. You can't approve it anyway. But as long as you're happy with the design and they're able to secure the permits, then you're going to be able to look at it and actually give it the review you want to give it. And my suggestion would be to come back with a modified resolution, which you can pull the old one off the table and then replace it with this one next week.
Councilmember Wilkie.
Councilman Stokes, help me here. Didn't we discuss this in a park board meeting?
Yes.
About this specific drainage and this park? I think I was one of them that brought up the issue of this nature area there where the cattails are, and that maybe they would not be able to destroy that because of what it is. It's a wetland. They offered, if I'm correct, Scott, that they would raise that, take that all out of there and raise it so that that would be more usable, because it is, in its current condition, it truly is not usable. It's wetland, like you said, the cattails are 6 feet tall, whatever, but I thought we approached this and said, we would like to see a design first before we recommended anything. Is that correct? Is that what we talked about?
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, we had wanted to just see some plans before we're gonna go to the council and plans before it gets approved. That's where we're at.
Well, let's get Council President Eaton first, and we have behind you, Kurt.
Okay,
Come on.
I guess I have no problem with the discussion that the park board had, but I'm wondering why it went to the park board instead of the planning board.
Well, it went through both. Planning board presented the park board. It's a park. The question was, and that's what I thought the question was, that the council was going to have before him, and it turned out it was not. I thought the question was, that's what I was told. So the question was going to be, will the city allow stormwater to be parked on city parks, placed on city parks? And the park board said, yeah, I think that's something that we should look at and consider, but before we approve something, we want to see what that design is. But there's two questions. Should water be allowed to be placed in city parks? I don't know why anybody would have a problem with that. What kind of water, under what conditions, and the questions of design, and any other questions that come along with that body of water, it would be the secondary question, I would think, because that would be the developer that would be dealing with that. When this issue was discovered, this wetland, now if this wetland, and it's believed that the water from this wetland drains out Nutting, I think the Nutting drain, into the Yellowstone, if that's the case, then most likely we believe that the Army Corps is going to consider that an unconditional wetland, which means now the federal government has control over what you do with that and what you don't do with it, and how, and there's permits to get, and we may not even be able to put stormwater on it because of that. But there's there's another area, another park that would be available too for that, I believe, south of there, correct?
This, from my understanding, from the way I went and looked at it and walked through it, it's mostly Russian olive trees, and I don't know if Colton has been through there, but it doesn't appear that it's the same vegetation that's to the north of where the road is going to be. It looks dissimilar, and it's Russian olive trees, so, and deer beds.
Well, that's why Sam suggested that you replace the resolution with the resolution that states, yeah, we don't see a problem with putting water on a park parcel alongside a development, but not, and there's no issue with that, but the council will not allow it until it sees the design and the scope of that project.
Right. And if I can answer a question about the planning board part. So the initial Iron Horse, it was one development. It was one plat. It was all of it. We consider it phase 1 and phase 2. The developer considers it, but the plat was filed entirely as one subdivision. They had a stormwater report that I have right here that did not fully address phase 2. Typically, it goes through planning board. These documents are reviewed by staff. It's reviewed in your subdivision improvement agreement. Those subdivision improvement agreements come to the city council along with the plat, and you formally approve the subdivisions at that time after it's been through planning board. That is right. In this case, this is after the fact. The council has already ruled that this plat is annexed, and it is in the city, and therefore any changes to that and changes in the law from the time it was filed to now is what happened. So before, stormwater ponds, like out in Elena, could be in your park dedication. So that stormwater pond out in Elena got put in as part of the parkland dedication. At a certain point, your planning board said, we don't want that to be counted towards the park dedication, so we're going to change your law. So planning board changed the rules, and this was only 2 years ago, 17. They changed it to where stormwater ponds can be in a park, but you can't count it against the dedication for how much land you have to give. The stormwater ponds have to be excluded from that dedication size. So it's how many square acres you're subdividing is, and then how much land you have to give to the city, or cash. In this case, like Elena, that pond down the bottom, what we went in and grassed, and like you want to say you want to see, that came after where the city had to go in and pass a park maintenance district, and we had to develop that with that money. So the city went in and put in sprinklers and grass, even including in that pond. If you go out there today, I was out there today, there's water in the bottom of that pond. It drains out into the big ditch. With that, we had to get big ditch shares in order to drain into the big ditch. So the big ditch allowed it to be put into that after it's retained and then drained out slowly, so it doesn't flood the big ditch. So that's all done through planning. In this case, council already had that crack at it. The city planning board, county planning board had that crack at it back in 2005, but the design wasn't done for phase 2, the northern half above the Nutting Drain. And then now that's where we're at. Your laws changed, and in order to do that, put that pond in there, it either has to be an amenity or they got to come up with more parkland dedication. Well, you already got the plat. So here's, we're trying to work, staff and the developer's engineer, we're trying to work on a compromise, what we can do down gradient to deal with stormwater. And that's what we're here for you tonight. So it went to the park board because it's already a dedicated park. So I think Colton.
Yeah, Colton, if you'd like to come up and introduce yourself, then we have one more question
Okay.
here. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah, I'm Colton Canaddard with Territorial Landworks. Marvin Brown is the developer of this project, so just here is representation there. Yeah, if you have a
Councilmember-
question, then I just wanted to add some clarity to what's been talked about.
Councilmember Wilkie has a question.
Well, if my memory serves right, we were talking about some drainage from the property to the north of this, the property owner to the north of this. There was water drainage from his property into either the wetland area or into the park area itself. We discussed that, but I don't remember the details beyond, well, the developer wanted to take and get rid of that wetland, and I still don't think he can do that. But figure out how to control the water that's coming from the property owner to the north. Because there is no control. It's going right through this property somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So I guess background on this, so as Kurt stated, this was all platted in 2005 under the Iron Horse Station subdivision. At that time, Engineering Inc. was the consultant for the project, and they completed a stormwater design report for the entire property, Phase 1 and Phase 2. However, the rules were different at that point, and what they had proposed for Phase 1, Phase 2 was we're going to size ponds sufficiently in Phase 1 so that Phase 2 doesn't have to do anything with stormwater. We're just going to put enough capacity in Phase 1 that when Phase 2 goes to build, we don't have to do that anymore. Well, over the course of 15 years since then, there's been stormwater issues. So like all regulations, they get more restrictive as time goes on. So now that's no longer the case. So we had to look at Phase 2 individually and decide, well, how can we make stormwater work there? The way the grades work out there, and to respond to Councilwoman Eaton's earlier comment about the two ponds, pretty close to the center of Phase 2 is a ridge, and it would be tough to flow water on the left side of, or the west side of the subdivision to the east, or the east side of the subdivision to the west. So looking at just how the grades work, we really do need to develop two ponds out there. The west one, there is no parkland over there. We're going to have to do that in an easement on a lot out there. So that is what we're proposing. But really, the way the rules work, that's not at all what we're discussing here, because that's on private property. It'll be put in an easement. We'll just have to design that for the regulations. However, the farthest east portion of our property is parkland, and because that's the most down gradient portion, that's what makes the most sense for us to flow our east half of our stormwater to. So when we started the process with the city and meeting with Kurt and his group, it was, well, you can't just build a pond in parkland. We need to get permission to do that. So that's why we went to the park board. And yes, as you mentioned at first, our first proposal in working with the city was, well, let's build a pond and use the material that we pull out of that to build up the remainder of the park, so that if the city of Laurel eventually wanted to develop that into actually an area that's usable and have picnic tables and a park in the future, they could do that. However, after meeting with the park board, there was concerns about the wetland, staying a wetland, and the wildlife that was down there. Plus, I know as far as wanting to maintain more parks, that didn't seem like something that was going to happen in the near future anyway. So we left that with, our design is going to be, let's disturb that area as minimally as possible and just get the capacity for stormwater we need. I would say that, so stormwater pond is just the engineering word we use, and I wish we said something different, because pond, you just think of, here's a bunch of water out there. I mean, this pond should have water in it for 24 hours during your biggest rain event you're going to have. It's going to be designed so that, 360 of the 365 days of the year, the water is just going in there and infiltrating or discharging out the outlet structure. It's when you have those really big rains that you need capacity, because that water needs to go somewhere, it either is going to back up into somebody's lot or into the road, or it's going to back up into this pond for a short period of time. So that's what we're proposing. The reason that we went this route is going through these designs is expensive for our developer. So before we wanted to know, can we even put a park in that, or a pond in that area, before we go and finalize the design and go through all these permitting processes. So really, we went to park board and then came here so that we could get permission to get approval of our design in that park area. We understand that, if you guys vote and say, yeah, a pond can go in that park area, we then have to work with Kurt and KLJ and DNRC and the Army Corps and all the people that are going to be reviewing this. But before we go through that process and all of that, if you guys tell us, no, you need to find another area for your pond, well then, it's not worth the expense of us trying to get all those designs and permits in place. So.
Council President Eaton.
Perhaps I have been misreading this then. The map that we have shows Lot 10 as being new proposed west end detention pond, that's shaded in blue, and then there's a park on the, what would be the south, or the north side, I guess, of Nutting Drain, south side of Great Northern Road, and then a park that's highlighted in blue again, that says retention pond required.
Yep.
And then, and that is divided, there is an area in green then that says area to be built up with pond excavation material.
Yes. So the exhibit that you have in your packet is what was initially brought to Park Board when we were proposing building up the other area there. However, after Park Board's meeting, there was a conversation about not having that build-up area. So I guess our updated design has, when I looked at it, it was a total depth of 3 feet in that pond area. And I can pass this around as well.
And lot 10 is not a drainage area, and there is no park area off of Alder?
So the park area to the south, those park areas are established, the one off of Alder. There was a park that was dedicated north of Great Northern and south of Great Northern. We're not proposing any new or less park area. However, the city essentially owns that parkland after it gets dedicated. So we are saying the park that is the northeast portion of our subdivision, we're asking for permission to put, I guess, capacity to discharge stormwater into there. Your earlier questions about wetland, my experience in wetland work, this shouldn't be a difficult wetland permit to get, because essentially we are taking wetland area and keeping it wetland area. We're just dropping the bottom of it by 3 feet. So really where you, in my past experience, where you run into difficulty with wetland is I have an acre of wetland, and after I'm done, I'm only going to have half an acre of wetland. Well, that's eliminating wetland. If you're just kind of altering the elevations in your wetland, that's usually not as difficult as permit to get, but obviously we'll go through the process and see what requirements they have. So,
Council President Eaton.
And lot 10 is not going to be a detention pond then, you said, because it's already developed and it's private land?
no, so it will also be a pond area, but it is going to be an easement on a lot that will be owned by either the HOA or whatever entity Marvin decides is going to own that lot that has the detention pond. So it will not be a pond located in parkland area. It'll just be located within an easement on a private lot.
And again, I think Cole keeps using the word pond, and he keeps thinking, I wish I wouldn't say that word. Kurt had brought to everyone's attention the other week, 2 weeks ago, that what we're in fact talking about is more of a stormwater runoff area like what you see on the south side of the south entrance into Walmart, where there's a swale and it's filled with rock, and unless we get a terrible amount of water in a rainstorm, significant rain event, you might see some water in there, but then it quickly dissipates and leaves, and that is what you're talking
Yes.
about when you mention the word pond, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Like I said, I wish they were not called stormwater ponds, because I know it does create an
I know every
image.
time he says the word pond, I see cattails, water, ducks, and a happy little scene of a pond, and that's not what, that might exist for 24, 48 hours at the most.
Right.
Are there any other questions? Kurt, do you have something you would like
I
to?
would have to say, I went in there and I walked through there, and I did walk through with these shoes, through that area and through the cattails, but it was frozen. I can't tell you what's gonna happen when it unthaws, but I know with cattails, there's gotta be standing water there. My concern is when they go in there, if they excavate and go down 3 feet, there may be water in that. And I don't know if they can answer that, what the groundwater table is gonna be, but if you go in and excavate in cattails and wetlands, there might be standing water. It depends on how the outfall is designed to where it would drain away readily. And until they have full design plans, we won't really know those details. agree? Or-
Yeah,
Yeah, go in there and see what it's like.
as Councilman Wilkie mentioned, there is a spring that feeds that area, and our outlet is going to have to make sure that that spring is not restricted and continues to flow. So once we go out there and there's actually, things are unfrozen, we're able to monitor how much flow is coming out of that spring, our outlet structure is going to have to make sure that that spring is just able to continue to flow as it does, so it doesn't back up in there.
I don't recall, was that spring on the private property to the north of that?
It is, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
that was it.
Yep, it's off our
All
site.
right, thank you.
Yes. Just one more thing to try to alleviate some concerns. One possibility you would have is you could conditionally approve this resolution. And the conditions could be getting approved design plans through the City of Laurel's engineering department and their contract reviewer, getting the required permits that are necessary to build this. Because really, I guess, getting a resolution signed that says you have permission to go forward and design this, honestly, we have permission to go forward and design this right now. There's nothing stopping us from doing the design. What we need is some sort of insurance or assurance that says that, if we get an approved design in this park area, we're going to be able to build in this park area. We're not going to be back at this point in a couple months with approved designs and permits in place. And we go, well, no, we don't want stormwater ponds and parks anymore. And then, our permits aren't doing anything for us. And Marvin has spent a lot of money obtaining those permits, and then we're starting over again. So.
Makes sense.
Well, I don't know if the council decided what they would like to see. Is that what they would like to see, is a resolution allowing for that under under conditions, if that's approved? Who would be the approving body? Kurt?
So what we have in place right now is, we were looking at water, sewer, curb and gutter, installation. Marvin has been wanting to do this development for quite some time. Normally, that would just go through engineering review, public works review, and lately, under the mayor's direction, we go through KLJ review, our on-call engineering firm, to make sure what developers design is actually reviewed by engineering firm, some of a PE. So someone with a PE stamp is also reviewing someone else's work and make sure that the city's covered. And that's the mayor's direction on going forward with that. And like I said, we haven't had a major subdivision, the street and design, since I think Elena, solid foundations, and Iron Horse. So it's been a while since the city has looked at a huge street design, stormwater. We just did Regal, that the council approved for annexation. We are doing that one. That's a smaller design because there's very little additional public roads. There's already public roads there, so that's a very small review. But in this case, yeah, we would like to have, staff doesn't have the ability to approve putting stormwater in the park right now. And that's where I asked our city attorney, the information that we have in code doesn't always give the permission for stormwater to be in the park. That is given to, and Sam's answer was, in absence of that, it's given to the local governing body. And I don't know if Sam Painter wants to reiterate that, but when the code doesn't dictate who gets to give permission, it refers back to the local governing body, and that's why we're here. Is that true?
That's absolutely true.
That's why we're here tonight, because staff doesn't have the ability to allow stormwater in the park. We do have the ability to approve the design after a design review, and then approve that construction of that without coming back to council. That's administrative duties versus council duties.
And I'm assuming that that would be something that would be no different than other designs that are normal industry standard designs for those type of.
Right. What we do is we go off of Montana Public Works standard specifications. The council has adopted those as our rules and regulations for that. We also have rules and regulations for street and sidewalk construction. And so we go look at those. We also go look at Montana Public Works Standards, and that Public Works Standards book is something that the contractors, engineers, and municipalities get a weigh in on and say, what are our design standards? Now, Billings, they take that and they approve the Montana Public Works Standards, and then they have addendums to that. Right now, currently, we don't have any addendums to those standards. We just go off of the Montana Public Works Standards. And then we do off our standard specifications that we have, that the council has approved in 2003. And so that's what we give our KLJ has for their resources, and along with stormwater, water and sanitary, you also have DEQ approval. So before they go through all this, they go through DEQ, they go through the city of Laurel, they go through our designs review, they go through Montana Public Works Standards on is what's going to be constructed there. They do sewer flows, how fast the sewer flows are going to be. They're going to do how much flow demand for fire hydrants that are going to be in the neighborhood. So all that has to be done. And it all has to be calculated by these gentlemen. And to go do that is a very expensive work. One thing about the streets is I can't give permission for the streets without knowing where the stormwater is going. And so that's the holdup. So that's where we're at. We're sitting in a holding pattern, can't do water, sewer, or street approval until we know where the stormwater is going to go. Because if the roads have to change and the elevation has to change, your water lines have to be 6 feet below so we don't freeze, like Red Lodge and Roundup and Big Timber. Your water lines are freezing in those communities, and our sewers don't freeze. So if you change the grade of the road to get stormwater to flow, you need the depth, and you need the water and sewer lines to also change in depth. So it's kind of critical that we know what we do with our street, what we do with our water and sewer, and where that stormwater is going to go. So it all rolls into one.
Councilmember Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any obvious drawbacks to having this pond at this location? That
You know,
can see?
the one thing I would say with any stormwater pond is if you go over to Walmart, they put rock in there in the parking lot, they put de-icers on it, and if you look at that rock, it's black. And it started out, I think, limestone, so it gets dirty. There's buildup. There's always, when you deal with stormwater ponds, there's always something to maintain. Outfall structures, they get covered in cattails or muskgrass, and those have to be scraped out and cleaned. We have stormwater ponds over on 8th Avenue by the church on West 9th Street. So if you look over, there's a chain link fence. In high flows up in Cherry Hills, that water goes down in there and fills those ponds. And we have to go over there and make sure that the outfall structures that leave that pond go over to 8th Avenue and then comes down the stormwater drain in 8th Avenue. So once those ponds fill, if those outfill structures get plugged, we need to go clean them. So there's always, you know, with stormwater, there's maintenance issues with it. Same with streets, curb gutter, everything else, there's maintenance issues. But with that, with any development, you're going to have issues. You're going to have something that has to be taken care of. Stop signs that have to be sanded in the winter, or, you know, salted and sanded in the winter, and everything else. So,
Thank you.
just part of our government operations.
And I might say that's one thing I've talked to Kurt about, that we need to make sure that whenever we are looking at growth, development, whatever it may be in the city, that we need to make sure that we do things properly. We don't ignore things or say that we can put that off and let somebody else can deal with that down the road. It's not important right now, because we need to do things right, but we want to encourage development. It's important for the city to grow. And grow responsibly, and in as much growing responsibly, we want to do it right. We want to put in good developments, and we want to deal with our stormwater properly. And obviously, somebody that wants to develop a property doesn't want to spend X amount of thousands of dollars trying to make sure they get all their permitting taken care of for stormwater on a parcel, and then be told that, no, we're not interested. You have to do something different, and that's, just throwing money away. They can't, just can't afford to be throwing money away. It's an expensive endeavor as it is to develop a piece of land like that, as Kurt laid out. A lot of the infrastructure, all of that falls on the developer. So we bring the services to that subdivision, but they're the ones that have to hook up to it and take care of those streets. And yes?
I didn't fully answer his question. I think the pond maintenance here's the criteria if you don't allow the stormwater to where you can fill in a storm surge. If you don't have ponds, and you don't have a way to regulate that flow, you're gonna end up, I don't know if anybody went out west of Laurel here in the last week on the snow melt, but there's water coming off of the farmer's field, and it came in and was flooding everybody out. The Hermans and Beckers, they had water up into their yards. That's what happens when you don't have any regulation on where that stormwater is gonna go. It comes down and it goes to the lowest point. So with this, we don't want the developers building subdivisions and just draining it down, like you go up all the way up Second Avenue right here, all the way up to Kiwanis Park. From Kiwanis Park down, all that stormwater comes down and hits these inlets right down here. That's your first storm. So we have to be very cognitive where that water is gonna go from each neighborhood and who's it going to affect. And if you were around here in the 70s, the underpass got filled and businesses had to sandbag. County residents called me a week ago wanting sandbags. So county residents calling the city of Laurel to get sandbags to go protect county property. And I tell them, you gotta go to the county, to your county residents. We don't work for you. Do I sympathize with them? Yeah. Did I go over and take a look at it? Yeah. Me and Matt responded. We went over there and we took a look at it, but snow melt, it can be rain events or snow melts that you have all the stormwater issues. And so I would say to you, if you don't do proper design and put in ponds and detention areas and retention areas, you will cause issues for the people that live down gradient, and we don't want to do that.
Council Vice President McGee.
Yeah, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, but I don't think this council has said it's opposed to, and it's in our Laurel Municipal Code, that these retention areas, for lack of the use of the word pond, can't be on parkland. I think what we're saying is we're just not going to sign off for somebody to do what we don't know is going to be done. That's all we're asking for, you know. So I think that's legitimate and I think it's fair. I understand, you know, not wanting to spend money if you don't know you're going to get a green light, but we don't want to give a green light until we know what's going to go there. We're not withholding, to the best of my understanding of the council, the idea that the retention ponds cannot go on parkland. We're not opposed to that. It's in our Laurel Municipal Code. It can happen, but by God, I'm certainly not going to sign on for it unless I see what's going to go there and I know what it's going to look like when it's done. So I think that's what we're asking for.
And what it's going to look like when it's done is going to be what the council has already approved that is allowed. Correct?
I'm afraid I'm lost there.
Just one more thing. So the way the stormwater regulations read that Laurel has and the way KLJ is interpreting them is that up to a 100-year storm event, you are not allowed to have more runoff come off your property after it's developed than there was before it's developed. So all your outlet structures need to be sized with orifices that in the 2-year event, even though you have all this pavement and all these houses out there and everything, you're not going to have more runoff coming off your field than when it was just native ground out there. And the same thing for the 10-year event and the 100-year event. So I guess my question to Councilman McGee would be if there's other requirements that the council would have to approve it, if you want to place those as conditions, we want to know that too. But we would design it to meet what all the regulating bodies' rules are. But no, those aren't going to regulate whether it has to be seeded afterwards or if we have to do rock at the bottom or anything like that. But if the council is going to have we're not going to be happy if this is a rocked pond. It needs to be native vegetation in there. That's not a current regulation. But if you put that in there as a condition, then we'll make sure we design it that way. That's what we're trying to avoid, is completing this design that meets all the rules and regulations and goes through KLJ and the City of Laurel's review, but then maybe it doesn't look the way the council wants, so then a complete redesign has to be done. So if there's any way we can know those up front to avoid that, that's what we're trying to do.
Council President Eaton.
So it kind of seems like we're at an impasse here, because if you read 1640-040, It says, stormwater detention or retention ponds may be located within public parkland, but such areas shall not count toward the parkland dedication requirement unless they are designed and constructed to serve as an amenity to the park and fit into the planned use and improvement to the park. Nobody has said anything about what the park is even supposed to look like, let alone what's going to be an amenity to it, except for that it's only gonna be about 3 foot deep, which I'm not clear if that's supposed to retain a 100-year event or not. And we're being told, we wanna see what the plans are, and we're not gonna develop a plan until we know we've got your approval. And I, just in talking 2 weeks ago about this, there was confusion about what had been discussed at the park board with regard to, somebody thought that it was going to be eventually be a fishing pond. Somebody else said, no, that was absolutely not the plan because it wasn't going to be deep enough. And so I guess I'm confused as to how this body is supposed to proceed when we're all looking at it at from a different angle. One entity wants to have our approval before they proceed, and one entity wants to have assurances that there's a design that's going to be palatable before we give approval.
Park Board made their recommendation on the fact that either that doesn't disqualify that certain amount of parkland that needs to be given to the city in lieu of cash. Where are we there?
So with that, back in 2005, the parkland dedication rules were different. So that's what we're having a heartburn over this. They had to give up so much land, so that land was divvied off. And in my case, I'm looking at it, I wasn't there to approve that. It was my predecessors, and when they did that, it was a different council. And they looked at that and said that is the parkland that we would accept as dedication. So when the local governing body does that, you accept the parkland as is in its current condition. And the city did that. So the parkland dedication gave to the city. So that is done. It's owned by the body of Laurel and representatives that are elected. So that's the council and the mayor. You speak for that parkland, and that's where we're at. Then the rule changed. So in the subdivision regulations, it said, and I believe it was off of what happened in these subdivisions, was that all of a sudden we had this parkland, okay, but now there's a stormwater pond in there. That isn't what, you can't go recreate in it. And so it shouldn't count against the parkland dedication. They have to, if they're gonna do that, they're gonna have to add more parkland and give the city a lot more parkland, and it won't go against that dedication. So exactly what you're reading. In this case, subdivision plat was already approved. We're trying to go off the best rules that we got. That's all we have, is that stormwater ponds can be placed in there because your rules changed. And that change, we looked it up, and it happened in 2017. But that was changed through planning board and then by the city council. And that, I didn't have anything to do with that as well, but that was the thought process, is we don't want to sit there and get parkland that just turns into a big stormwater pond. In this case, like I said, we're going off with the best thing that we have in your current rules without rewriting a new ordinance to address this. So if we had to look at it, we're asking the council to essentially allow this to go forward with the current conditions as it was platted in 2005, and then try to make the special conditions on dealing with the stormwater now that they're ready to go and fully develop the site. So the question is, does the council want to take the stormwater into that area, or do you want them to dedicate more parkland? If that's,
Councilmember Stokes?
change it out, I don't know.
I don't think the park board really had a problem with the, I don't want to say ponds, but
Yeah.
the
Storm.
ponds. What they wanted to see was, there were some people on the park board that wanted to see it stay as it was, and people wanted to try to develop it, okay? So they kind of wanted to see the plans. There was no objections to the ponds at all. right? So I think what we need to do is,
Right, so I guess to help us out, and as an engineer, I'm not good at designing something if I don't know what rules I need to design it to. So I have no problem if the council has an additional, for us to be okay with this, we need it to be able to be used as a fishing pond in the future. I don't know what that concern is, but I personally, if it comes out of this with just you have permission to design, but we need to see what the design is after this because we don't know if we're going to like it or not. I don't know where to go from that. I mean, I have the Laurel Municipal Code rules that tell me what storm event it needs to handle, what I can discharge from it. But I need to know, you know, if the council has other requirements that are going to be placed on that for it to be okay, that's what I would like to get included in that approval so that we're not in a gray area when we're completing our design and we know what rules we're designing to, so that when we get to the end of that approval process, we know if we meet all of those, that something else isn't going to come up. I mean, developers do not like the gray areas because there's a risk in development. So it's, as long as there's rules and, you know, we know what we need to meet, that's really what we need or are hoping to get to.
And the Public Works and Planning, their concern is we would like the stormwater to go someplace other than down the street into the same storm drainage that we currently have that isn't going to get any bigger unless a big bucket of money falls on the city to change it. So they want to find a way to deal with this. And this subdivision, which was platted a long time ago. This isn't talking about some new subdivision, because that subdivision that would be platted under a different set of rules, the current rules that are different than this one because of the age of this one when it was platted and approved for development. And I think Sam had something he wanted to bring forth.
Well, I just had a question on your time frame. How long is it going to take you to put a design together for this area and come back and say, this is what it looks like? We're not changing what this park looks like or what this park does. We're not putting in a soccer field. This is a design for the water, and this is what it's going to look like. How long would that take you?
They have to get permitted first.
Yeah, I mean, in our review timelines, DEQ allows themselves 55 days to review something. And then when they reply with comments, they're allowed 30 days after that to respond to comments. So, I mean, just that review process, the fastest is going to be 3 months from DEQ's side of things. I don't have the floodplain or wetland permit timelines right off the top of my head.
So this isn't
but-
tomorrow. This isn't a rush thing that we gotta hurry up and get this done and approve exactly what this is gonna look like. Because I think, just from my perception of sitting here, I'm thinking that developer concerns are that you're going to go and design this and come back and the city's gonna say, nope, you have to go get a certain shade of rock to line that drainage pond with, and that will add hundreds of thousands of dollars onto what you are putting in there actually. When the intent is really just to deal with the stormwater and put it in that area Kurt showed us the pictures of, which isn't really a green grass park at all. It's really just wetland.
It's natural.
It's a natural area that is not intended to be changed. Really, it's intended to deal with runoff. Is that
Right,
sort
no,
of where we're at?
I agree with you. No, if you give approval, there's not gonna be excavators out there tomorrow. But getting the design and what direction are we going and we're submitting for permits is gonna be tomorrow. So it's just,
So maybe the question for the council is, and the mayor, is the permit or permission you're looking for just the authorization to design and put a water collection area into this area deemed a park?
Yeah, so, I
And
mean,
not exactly, this is what it has to look like.
if I got exactly what I want leaving this, it would be permission from the city council to put a stormwater pond in this park area that meets all the requirements of all the jurisdictions that have review on this. Not a, you can go build this tomorrow. Just, if you design something that meets all the jurisdictional requirements that'll possibly be able to look at this, and they all give you the okay, that city council is not gonna have a problem with it.
Kurt?
Just, so I had a feeling that because I wasn't familiar with the area, I drive by it every day, but I don't see past the Russian olive trees. I had our city crew go up there and trim some of the Russian olive trees to make a path through there, and I have actually traffic cameras on Alder Avenue. I thought, well, if I needed to direct the mayor up there, and for him to go see this issue, or any council member to go see this issue, that you would know. So if you, right now, if you drive up Alder Avenue past Maryland and go up there, there will be 2 traffic candles up there. That's, if you look off to the left, you don't even have to get out of your vehicle, you can see that area. There's also, right at the intersection of Ridge and Alder, we trimmed where the road is supposed to be going through. I trimmed a hole, or had the guys trim a hole through those Russian olive trees so you don't get your eyes poked out if you wanted to walk in there and take a look at it. It is public land. The city of Laurel already owns it. It's, you can go and recreate it in there right now as far as walking through there. And so to familiar myself what I went through there, and then because it was kind of dangerous for me to get through there, I had our guys open it up with a pole saw and get some of those Russian olive trees backed up so you can actually walk in and out of there without having to get one of those Russian olive thorns in you. So I don't know if that helps anyone, if you want to go look at that area, see what its condition is prior to decision by this
I don't-
body, or,
It's not going to have
Yeah.
water in it.
but that's why we tried to get some pictures, so you didn't have to do that. So I went and flew my drone up right off the road there and tried to take some pictures and take some pictures in there for you. And I was trying to do, as I explained to the mayor earlier, I was trying to do my due diligence as a public employee to show the council what that actually area looks like currently in its current state.
Councilmember Colosi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this resolution and the way it's written now, my understanding, the developer would like to part added to that if the pond, excuse me, meets all the regulations and everything, that we can go ahead and approve that resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that would just need to be added?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, what the plan, I think, going forward is to come up with a resolution that satisfies what the developer needs and also protects what the city council's talking about. That the area is not gonna be completely wiped out and substantially changed. That bodies having the authority to review this are quite a few. And I can't imagine you being able to get anything by any of these entities, starting with the city public works department and the engineers. I mean, you're going to have to comply with the public works standards. And again, this isn't a complete rebuild of this area. It's just designing it to catch water, is my understanding. And I just want to offer, coming back with a resolution that is different language that conditions this upon approval of the entities that must review it. And I'll list those in there. And I think that would satisfy the developer. I think city staff would be okay with that responsibility. And hopefully the council would feel comfortable with that. Because I don't see how a developer could go forward without having permission to even do this.
Planner Altanoga have anything to add to that, or?
I mean, Kurt had addressed most of what because I had talked with him and Forrest earlier today, and so I had actually made a bunch of notes if I was gonna, present to the council, but Kurt had covered most of it, and we're in basically complete agreement on the matter of, we need to retool the resolution a bit to cover all of our bases and ensure that they have the go-ahead to design and bring back to us for review a proper design for the stormwater pond. I don't have much to add. Kurt did a good job of detailing everything.
The one thing we talked to Nick about earlier is also as we go forward with subdivisions, this is going to be one of those things that he's going to be looking at for your subdivisions as far as annexation. It will be an integral part because parkland dedication, stormwater, the rules and regulations to do that, he's going to be very involved. So that we did have him in the conversation earlier tonight when we were talking about just wetlands. And what I have to say about this park versus the park on the south, because there is no cattails in there, I think that could be something like anything that city council wanted as far as that being developed. Because there's no cattails in there, that's Russian all trees, the trees can be knocked out. You could have a dog park there, you could have a local community swing set there, something like that. In that area, it just got to be cleaned up and dealt with. To the north, I don't see the city ever developing that as far as parking because of the cattails. What I've learned and what we're going to Helena for, me and the mayor are going to Helena to talk about the Army Corps about wetlands here Thursday. When we did our pipeline, wetlands is a huge thing. And so the Army Corps of Engineers, we're dealing with wetlands right now from the intake project, and it is a big deal for us, and I don't see staff ever recommending going in there and going, hey, we want to do something with that, those cattails, because it's not like we have enough time on our hands to go in there and say, we want to go before you go do that. The park on the south, I could see something being done with that. The Russian olive trees just got to get cleared out of there, so. And it's going to be right off the road, and it's going to be the south, and so I think that's a usable space for possibly a neighborhood park ground and playground. Yes, you'll have a cattails across the ditch, and there's concern, like you talk about fence at Park Board, and is it fenced? Currently, the Nutting Drain District is right there to the south, and it has water in there year-round, and it's not fenced throughout the entire community. It's buried. It goes under First Avenue, goes through Nutting Park, and they buried it through Kiwanis Park, where Kids Kingdom is. Kids Kingdom is actually built on the Nutting Drain District. There's a drain pipe under there. And it feeds right north of the clinic, and if you've been around long enough, that used to be an open ditch. We got the canals in Laurel, we've got everything. So when I sit there and say, well, kids, you know, we as parents that have children, you shouldn't teach your kids to go into those, play in those areas. And that's just one of the unfortunate things. That's why the YMCA and keeping the pool open, I've been a big advocate. Let's keep the pool open and keep those kids learning how to swim in our pool that is fenced, instead of in the ditches and the canals. And so offering the kids in the community a place to swim so they don't go up and swim in ponds and ditches and stuff like that. So
Plus, that'll only have any type of water in it, typically after a significant rain event for a very short period of time.
right. Like I said, that'll be all flushed out through, and the biggest thing that I've got, and I expressed to Colton earlier this evening right before council, was the Army Corps of Engineers. If this is a jurisdictional wetland that they deem as a jurisdictional wetland, there's really not going to be a lot the city can do with that land. It's going to be required
Oh, yeah.
what the Army Corps of Engineers says we can do with it. It will have nothing to do with what we say is locally. It's going to be what they say, and we have to follow it because federal, state, local. That's how the ball rolls. Federal has the first crack at it, then the state, and then the local level. So, if it's determined to be jurisdictional wetlands, which we believe it is, the water that flows out of there flows into the Nutting Drain, and then that goes, like the mayor said, goes to the Yellowstone River.
Any other questions on this? As Kurt stated before I get to you, that if this is a jurisdictional wetland, and now the Army Corps may allow so much stormwater to be directed towards it, but you could never do anything with it, and they have total control over what you do and don't do with it. I think at some point you could probably tear it up and build on it if you thought you had to, but then they would make you mitigate that, and you would have to provide X amount of wetlands to replace that you tore up. So there's federal regulations that are quite extensive when it comes to these. And they're a great filter. That's what that does. It filters water. That's why wetlands are a big thing in cities anymore. You can go anywhere, Great Falls, Helena, Belgrade, out here at Shiloh, Bozeman, you see wetlands all over that have been put in because of the benefits they have to communities. They help raise the water table, help keep the water table higher, help mitigate runoff, they collect runoff. They're a great tool and resource for communities, and a lot of communities have been embracing that as well. Councilmember Eaton.
Yes, so could I get clarification, please? Will the council be voting on this resolution next Tuesday as it is, or is it going to be reworded?
I think what we've been discussing is we'd like to bring to the council a reworded resolution that says that we'd like council to allow for stormwater to be placed on park land in this development, as long as the construction and design of that passes all of the regulatory bodies, correct? Something of that nature?
You could, even if you want to kick it back, I don't know if you want to kick it back to the park board. That's what Councilmember Stokes was referring to, that maybe the park board wants to look another crack at it and take a look at the design, and maybe not for a whole redesign, but maybe a preliminary look at it and see. I don't know what you want to do.
Design is moot because
Yeah.
that may be determined by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Right, and that's one thing about Army Corps of Engineers. You can build anything you want in the wetlands. It's how you mitigate it. You take wetlands out, you have to put wetlands in somewhere. And it could be here, it could be Bozeman, it could be anywhere that they choose if you do the wetland mitigation credits. So like on our pipeline route, we went through wetlands. We had an impact on some of those. We put in fill. I think it cost the city $8,000 towards that project to mitigate that. Of course, it was part of our permitting, so FEMA paid 75% of that cost. So where the city was charged $8,000 to come up with credits, 75% of that came from FEMA dollars because it was part of a permitting process. And that was in one section of county road where we actually got permission from the county to build in county right-of-way. And the city, to access our control building, we went through a wetland. And like I said, that was $8,000 in mitigation credits. And what that does is the mitigation credits go into a bank, and they then go out for wetland projects that can be anywhere in the geographical region. So it goes to environmental groups and construction engineering outfits, and they go in and they put in wetlands in places. The same thing with roads, like the state highways, when they go in. 8th Avenue was one of those where that was my first introduction in wetlands and what happens, because there was a stormwater ditch that went right above West School over there. And it's a storm drain ditch coming from Cherry Hills. Well, it was never been maintained. I come there, I see a ditch that is plugged and stormwater that's backing up into Cherry Hills. We went and cleaned it. So when the state came in and we went along 8th Avenue, and they said, hey, where's the wetlands? I go, what wetlands? They go, well, there was wetlands here. And I said, that's a storm drain ditch. I clean that. We clean that maintain it. And he's like, oh, well, we have that delineated wetlands. I said, no, that's stormwater. We clean it. And you can do that. You maintain. But because I had cattails in there and nobody had cleaned it for years, it wasn't a problem until it backs up. Well, then we went in and cleaned it, and they took that off and said, oh, well, those are not delineated wetlands then. That's a storm drain ditch. And they can't claim the storm drain ditch that we maintain as a wetland. So I've been dealing with this since 8th Avenue went in, and was doing plans probably in 2007 and 8, and then we built it, I believe, in 2009. But that's what the state came in. The environmental assessment came in and said, well, those are wetlands. And I said, no, that's a storm drain ditch. So in this case, like I said, you can build in wetlands. You just, what it takes to mitigate it and what is going to make the Army Corps happy. So.
Right.
Yep.
The developer isn't going to do that.
Yep, and that would be on them to figure all that out. And then bring it back to us and say, this is what Army Corps is requiring.
So I don't know, is that what the council would like to see? Council?
Well, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the council, I'm only speaking for myself, I would certainly be a lot happier than that, than the present resolution that's before the council.
I would agree with that. I don't think the resolution was correct and shouldn't have been before you, and I was led to believe that that was different than what it was, but after it was tabled and we went back and looked at that, I'm glad it was tabled. Councilmember Wilkie, did you have?
Well, I'm agreeing with Councilman McGee on that this resolution doesn't fit. Park Board, as far as them looking at the design, a couple of things, I want to make sure that that wetland kind of stays the way it is. The park that's there now, even if you put that water collection area in there, addresses that natural spring that comes off the property to the north and control that water that's coming through there. Those are probably the 3 or 4 things that I'm concerned about. I agree with you, and Matt at that meeting said, we don't need any more parks to maintain because we can't keep up with what we have. So we were okay with that. Whatever you do with this little park on the south side of that road, I don't care. You can develop it whatever you want to, but if everything else stays natural, you put your collection area in there and control that spring water without disturbing it. You know, I don't think that guy wants you to disturb where that water comes from, because that's on his ground. I'm okay with that. Whatever that design comes out to be, I'm okay with that. But I think we just need to kind of look at it and then make a recommendation, which we already did, to the city council. But I agree with Councilman McGee, we need to change this resolution so it addresses that.
I'll be brief on it. Parkland doesn't mean you have to recreate in it. Parkland can be just open space.
Right.
So,
That's what we want.
yeah, it's open space and anybody can walk in there. It's public. So I went through there, and like I said, it's frozen. I could get through there with these shoes, but in a month, I'm not gonna be able to walk through there with these shoes.
Probably
And,
not.
you know, and I probably wouldn't wanna walk through there with even knee height. I don't know how far you would sink, but, it is a nature area. I look at it as a nature area, and there's pheasants in there, and there's ducks in there, and there's deer in there.
That's why I brought it up the first time.
So, I agree with you that as far as having wildlife in your urban interface, I mean, you can see what Colstrip does with that. They have bow and arrow hunting, Roundup has a problem with urban deer eating people's roses, and they deal with that. So I'm not a big advocate of deer in town, but pheasants and ducks and geese, you know, that's a different story. We have them all over the place, but.
Okay.
Yeah, KLJ isn't gonna interfere with the natural flow of that spring that runs through there. I mean, that would be ridiculous, and I don't even think that would be approved by, wouldn't be approved by your body of public works here in the planning department. So that would, yeah, wouldn't make sense. I mean, we chose KLJ for an engineering firm for a reason. They do all kinds of projects, all kinds of projects. They do parks, they do parkland, they do stormwater projects, street projects. They've been in business for a long time. Not because they're doing a poor job or doing an incomplete job. At some point, you have to have some faith in those people that you employ to work for you, design engineers, your local body of planning and public works. And they have the city's best interest in heart at all times. That's why your public works director walked off the road off of Alder and walked back in to see what that land looked like and said, oh, I think we need to have a little more conversation about this because this looks like a wetland. And maybe this can't be disturbed or shouldn't be disturbed without talking about it because there could be implications on the city. So that's why we're here now. The developer wants to develop this. They've been working on this for a long time under old laws that have changed. And they're just looking for the best method and want to take care of the stormwater that under the direction of our city, they're feeling that that would be the best method of dealing with those events that happen instead of directing them down into town. And that would be under this subdivision. The new, like I said, new subdivisions are under different rules and regulations. This was platted back in, what, '05, correct?
Yes, correct.
So, and they're doing their best under what they have to work with. And we're doing, I think, our best to make sure that we're doing the best for the city and for the developer and for that water when those events happen to take care of it.
The one thing I would have to say, and as the city goes forward, and that's why it's so important to listen to the council and listen to your planning board and your planning board members as you want these subdivisions to look like. I don't believe it should be staff's decision on what you want for your parklands and what you want to do with your parklands. I think that's what your role of your park board does, and that's the role of the city council does. So here we have, this is a weird situation we're in tonight, and that's, you had parkland dedicated to you in 2005, and no mention of how this parkland has been in 14 years until now. But the Parks Board, you probably didn't even know that all this land was in the city's control for the last, since 2005. The city has not done a thing with it. We haven't. It's been just vacant. And with that, you have a lot of these parks that are in the city that, or outside the city, that are county parks that were dedicated under subdivision. They don't have park master plans for each one of them. They haven't been spelled out what you want to do with them. And the city's kind of been always in the rears. We get this parkland dedication, but then we get no plan. And we're always fighting that cycle. Well, what do you want to see the park? Realistically, you should require, when you do subdivision, park master plans for that development, what they can actually be, so that when the council approves these subdivisions, you go, hey, we already know in advance what these parks are going to look like and what they can be used for. I would then sit there and say, that is, when you do a subdivision review, you should get the Parks Board involved in it prior to accepting the plat, get city council's approval, and then sit there and say what land you are willing to take. Because before, I can't guarantee that you'd willing to take, if you knew it was all cattails, would you be willing to take that? But that question was asked and answered in 2005. It's now under city control. In the future, if I was a staff and I were reviewing that and was working with the planner, I'd sit there and say, absolutely not, you're not taking that. That's land that the developer used to develop, and we're not going to take that land. Why would the city take that land? Because you can't use it, unless the council and the park boards will want to change it and say, hey, we'll take that. And that's where I think that's the city council, park boards, and planning boards preview. You get all that feedback from every one of you and say, hey, what are you willing to take for parkland education? If you don't want to take that land, take cash. It's totally up to you guys what you accept. And you said that we're not going to take that land. We want cash in lieu. So if we can't maintain our parks and we can't keep doing it, your rule should be, we don't want any more parks, we want cash. Give us cash so that we can develop and maintain our parks that we currently have. And build playgrounds and that's a way you could fund that. Cash in lieu. You just make that rule, we're not going to accept these parks. Land that we can't use, we want cash in lieu, and we're going to go build and design a playground in Murray Park. I think the resolution, I'm not sure, I think between the mayor and Sam and Colton, I think you would want to come up with some kind of agreement on what that resolution would say with council's considerations. I think you're totally, I can understand 100% why the council has their concerns and they don't want to sit there and see that. And like I said, I went in there specifically last week to take a look at it. I also then grabbed the CEO and took him up there and showed him, and I was concerned too as well. I wanted to make sure, hey, what's going on up here? And that's why I went and did the drone pictures and got everything I could for you guys to try to help make it, move the process along. I would like to see the development go forward, but like I said, it's up to you guys.
Is there any other questions? Councilmember Wilkie?
One more comment, and then we can put this to bed so we can move on.
Okay, 'cause we need to-
Everything you said, I agree with. What I said needed to be on the record, okay?
Yep.
What happens sometimes when we assume something, you know what that means, okay?
Yep.
So it needed to be on the record, what I was thinking, what I think the park board would like to see, and then come back with a recommendation.
Absolutely.
And have the city council take care of that resolution and bring it back.
We need to take a 2-minute break, Karen. we're gonna change council secretaries out. We have a backup.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Not all public councils, I perhaps some.
We're paid, we're not elected officials.
I know. You can't even legally archery hunt. Can't discharge a bow.
We just beat this.
Yeah. Unless something. Yeah, no,
Beat
legally.
it to death.
You could do that.
City.
You can start that badly.
Exactly what we.
I guess you could dig a pit. Well, actually, you can't. You can't do face. You can't do face.
Address
City
the
property.
leave the wetlands. I was concerned about the wetlands because I ran into that when I sold my dad's property. That is that wetland that my dad put in, were allowed to be there. And he got money for it. I don't know if he got money all the years that he was there or just one time.
She takes this time and comes.
Never, ever, to the end of time, we changed. That's the way it was written.
I didn't catch that.
All right. Thank you for that. Brittany had to leave, so I appreciate your indulging her and allowing her to skedaddle. So we will bring a much better resolution that I think, I hope that you will find satisfactory. Council President Eaton.
And even though it's been a lengthy, nay, painful process this evening, I would like to thank Councilmember McGee for tabling that in the first place, because it certainly initiated a lot of conversation that did not happen previously.
I would agree. I think everybody would agree.
You're welcome.
You're the hero today. With that, we'll move on if we can. Everybody would like to, we will move on to item number 4 under executive review, which is resolution number R18-84. This is a resolution of the City Council granting permission for a property owner to utilize decorative gravel and rock along a portion of the boulevard adjacent to the owner's property located in the city of Laurel. And with that, we have a gentleman that would like to present that to the council. State your name and address for the council, please.
My name's George Eastman, and I live at 519 Fifth Avenue on 6th Street, right on the corner. And I was gonna have all this done last fall, and then I had a stroke, and then it snowed, and so the rock is still sitting there. And right now I've been waiting for it to dry up so I can get in with forklift to move it off the boulevard and into the yard where it belongs. And I'm just asking for 30 to 45 more days to get it dried out, and so I can get in with the forklift to move these rocks, because they're big rocks. It's not gravel, it's rocks.
Right, and I believe there was some concern that those were gonna stay in the boulevard, and you're saying that those are not
No.
staying in the boulevard?
No.
They're going in the
They're
front?
not even gonna be, none of them's gonna be in the boulevard,
In the front yard or backyard or front
Both.
yard? Both?
both. The boulevard is gonna be grass still, grass
Any-
and trees. I'm putting some trees on there.
So we'll be asking this permission to store?
This resolution is granting permission for a property owner to utilize decorative gravel and rock along a portion of the boulevard adjacent to the homeowner's property.
They've already been there.
Who's already been there? I don't,
I put them there, and then I found out I needed permission to put them there.
right.
And so I was gonna come in at that time and get permission. Well, then I had a stroke, and I haven't made it back, and
Okay, so that's the first question. Is, you have put that in, and I think we had pictures prior, but we don't have pictures tonight. Do we? I can't see them. Of the gravel?
it's rock, it's not gravel.
This says gravel
Yeah,
and
it's,
rock.
it's not.
That was written before we had pictures.
So that's the first question for the council.
Did I just hear he's withdrawing his request to put?
Are you withdrawing that request, though? You're gonna put grass back in or not? You want, you
On the
still,
boulevard,
yeah,
yeah, there's, grass is gonna be on the boulevard.
right, but where the rock is and gravel,
That'll be grass.
you're gonna
Where
take
the
that,
rock is right now is gonna be grass. I am moving all of those rocks into my yard.
so all of the boulevard will be grass, back to
Right.
grass. Because you put it, part of it in the gravel and then found out you couldn't.
No, no, I've never had any in gravel.
Okay. Boy, Councilmember Stokes.
I think what Mr. Easton is, he wants to move those rocks out, right?
Right,
No gravel or anything.
no gravel,
All gonna be
no,
grass.
right.
You just want 45 more days
right. So I need time for it to dry
and
enough
move
to.
it into your backyard.
Right,
whatever.
and my
That's
front
all.
yard, yeah, it's not gonna be there anymore. And no gravel.
Councilmember Wilkie.
I think that resolution should reflect what Councilman Stokes just mentioned, that he wants an extension to the permission to store those
Right.
articles on the boulevard, and the boulevard will not be changed or altered after those supplies are removed.
Yes,
Then that resolution answers his request.
And Council President Eaton.
I think Councilmember Wilkie made a very observant statement there, and I would just like to clarify then, you would like another 45 days, starting when?
today. I'm just looking for dry weather. Now, we're supposed to have more snow, more rain this next week and stuff like that. So I don't wanna say I'll do it in a week or 10 days or something, because I'm driving a big forklift, and it'll sink out of sight if I drive it on the boulevard and in my yard and stuff like. I'm looking for dry weather.
Can we put can we start the calendar like at April 1st and say 45 days from there would be May 15th?
That would be great.
Would that be all right with everybody?
That would give me plenty of time.
We identified we'll have to change the resolution to reflect the time, because there isn't any time in the resolution before you. And the other resolution to allow for decorative rock would be moot, because you're not gonna leave decorative rock in the boulevard.
No, no.
Originally,
Director Markey Garden?
Mr. Eastman, you had presented to the council that
Yes.
I would like to permission to place gravel cover on the ground cover on the boulevard and cover it with gravel.
That was to begin with, long time ago.
Okay, so
That
you're
was before I even moved the rock in.
Okay, so that's
Right.
not what you're asking today. then?
No.
So I think he's rescinding his request to put in gravel in the boulevard.
Yep,
Yeah.
From his
no.
original letter to the council last fall.
yep.
Okay.
We've still been taking it up. That's what's been confusing the body. We've had two questions, but it appears there was actually only one question. And so if we bring a resolution before the council next week allowing Mr. Eastman to store the rocks and gravel on the boulevard for another 45 days from the 1st of April, and then at that time, they have to be removed from the boulevard, and the boulevard has to remain in grass. That is what he would be asking for, and that would be what you would be considering. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Correct.
Council Vice President McGee?
Yes, sir, I don't have a problem with that, but I do want to point out that this has been a violation of our municipal code since last September, probably, and definitely documented from October, okay? So it's been ongoing for a while, and I understand his request. I'm not opposed to the May 15th deadline, but I am adamant that that May 15th is a drop-dead deadline in which penalties will ensue if this isn't taken care of.
Agreed.
I agree.
Did I say that any better?
We'll add some sort of stiffener in the language at the end of that. for you. How's that? Does that satisfy you, Mr. Eastman?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, I'm sure glad you came and straightened everybody out. So,
Mine seems like such a tittle tiny problem compared to what we just went through.
well, they're they're all problems, though. We all treat them
Oh,
the same.
yeah.
So,
I understand.
and we all care about everybody that has the problems as much as the other as well. So,
Well, I appreciate the help that you guys have given me.
well, I appreciate your time sitting through the other problems that come and talk to
Okay.
us. So,
Thank you. I'm going to take off if it's okay.
you're very welcome to.
Thank you.
Councilmember Her.
I would just like to, for future reference or something, we've got this resolution 4. What are they doing about the rest of the people in the town who are putting gravel down? We need more teeth and more something.
Most of them don't know. They
That's
assume
right.
that there's no problem and it looks nice and it's better than brown lawn.
Yep,
And
but I just think we need some kind of a way of getting to these people. Allowing it, I don't care. Monitoring it, doing something.
well, frankly, I think that allowing for some sort of gravel is not a bad thing. It allows for a different type of landscaping other than dry grass, because some people can't afford to water that. And some people, I have an in-ground sprinkler system within my house when I bought it in the boulevard. So it gets watered every morning in the summer at 4:30 in the morning while I'm sleeping. But
Right.
people that have to water with a hose, that's an inconvenience, It's a lot of, and it's a small strip, a lot of work. Yes, sir.
On Sunday, I went for a walk, and within 6 blocks of my house, there are 4 houses with gravel on the boulevard. That's fine, but how do we put control in the future? We're talking about it now, but we're not doing anything.
We either need to look at the ordinance and change the ordinance, or talk to staff and direct staff to come up with some ideas in changing an ordinance, and then bring that back to council through Park Board or Public Works, probably Public Works, excuse me, and address it that way, and then bring it to council, which is something that I would think that would be a great idea to do.
Thank you. That's me too.
If this council thinks that that's a great idea, I'll direct staff to work on that so that they can bring something to the council. Would you like the staff to do that?
Yes.
I think that would be wonderful.
Then, since I have the planner in the room, I can direct the staff to to work on that and bring some options to the council. There may be may look at some of the gravel that's in place in town to get some ideas of what has been done, and hopefully that could be encompassed in what we're talking about, but we will do that.
Thank you.
We will also remove item number 4, which actually has a resolution number on it, from the council agenda next week, and we will have a modified number 5 with a resolution number, which will probably be R18-84. Yeah. Since council put these two to work, we'll let them go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
Yeah. All right, one more issue to tackle. So there's options. There's always options. Some councils have done different things on this issue. Others wait until somebody brings it up and forces an opinion. So it was brought to my attention that since we went through this process a year ago where the issue was brought up and was forced to be resolved at the end of a strange election cycle, I said that I would bring that forward to council at some time, so I've brought it forward. Now, I understand that there's at least one council member that has concern about it. There may be more council members that share that concern. So what I would like to do is have Sam run through this, and we'll just highlights, and we'll then open it up for debate.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have before you is numbered 01901. And I think you saw this already, and you've decided to throw it on the table pending further discussion. What the ordinance says, well, I think it's clear what it says, the intention is this. The problem the city ran into, I see a typo on there, last election cycle, basically came down to, can an employee serve in an elected position? That elected position was the mayor. We researched it, worked on it exhaustively, and we answered the question, no. I handed out, or I asked that the Attorney General opinion, well, it's not an Attorney General opinion, it's a letter of advice that was issued actually after the fact, when Laurel was able to resolve its problem. It's clear to me that the choice for the city is this. The most defensible thing to do is to adopt your own ordinance and say whether or not an employee can serve in an elected position, whether or not an employee of any kind can serve in an elected position. That is the easiest for me to defend, because frankly, the council then would have said no. Can't do it. If you're an employee and you want to be elected, you have to pick. Take the elected position or remain an employee. That's the easiest thing for me to defend for the city is this. Do you have to adopt this? Absolutely not. It's up to you as the legislators to come up with the ordinance you're comfortable with. And that being said, if you adopt something to, say, exempt certain positions, you can serve as ambulance driver, you can serve as a reserve officer. The more categories you start to exempt and say you can serve as an elected official and in a certain position, the more exemptions you make, it makes it a little bit more difficult to defend, okay? The parameters the parameters, if you look at the Attorney General letter, the second paragraph is where you need to focus. I don't know if you can put that up there, but if everybody has that in front of you, that paragraph explains where this law came from. It's a 1914 case. I don't think a lot of us were around, but it's still good law. It's still the law in Montana. This is a Supreme Court case. This is the criteria you want to apply to the positions, okay? And the criteria is that an employee cannot serve, a type of an employee cannot serve an elected position at the same time if the officers are incompatible. Incompatible means, and it lists these, when one has power of removal of the other, when one is in any way subordinate to the other, when one has power of supervision over the other, and this is big, or when the nature of the duties of the two offices are such to render it improper from considerations of public policy. That's the fuzzy one. Now, I understand some of the members of the council want to tweak this ordinance. There's nothing wrong with that. What you need to do is send suggestions that you want to see incorporated in this ordinance to the mayor, and I can incorporate them here. I would suggest if somebody says, I think that the elected mayor could be an employee, I'm going to tell you, no, that will never withstand a court challenge. If you tell me the fire chief should be able to, he's a volunteer, should be able to run for council or should be able to be a mayor, I'm going to say that's not going to withstand a court scrutiny. It's simply not. How about reserve officers? They're not paid, from what I understand. They're not supervised by a council, by the council, for the most part. I could, as the attorney, I can run through and say, well, you do purchase workers' comp insurance that cover them. There may be some sort of connection there. If the reserve officer went berserk and went and beat somebody up with a baton, who's going to get sued? The city, right? So there is some sort of connection, but is that connection, if you say that's an exemption you want to make, a reserve officer, maybe an ambulance driver, I would not be able to tell you that would not withstand court scrutiny. It's not an obvious incompatibility to me. It's more of a reach, and if the city wants to make exemptions, you can make those exemptions. Again, the easiest thing to defend is a flat prohibition across the board. That's easy for me. As you start paring them back and putting certain criteria in, then we're going to have to talk about it and look at each of the exemptions you want to adopt. So I hope I'm making a little clear that this is not what you have to adopt. This is the easy prohibition. If you want something different, propose it and we'll look at it and then analyze it under the case law. And then we'll come forward with it, and if the council's happy with it, you adopt it. And it becomes the law of the city that if this happens again, one of the big complaints in the past, you remember, was, I had no idea I couldn't be an employee and run for mayor. Well, now, if it's in your ordinance, there's no question that an employee is unable to run and serve. They're going to be able to run, it's the service that's the problem. You can't serve in both. So that's kind of the intention, is to get this in your ordinances so that everybody knows the rules. You don't have to fall back on Montana law and say, by the way, you can't do this because it's contrary to Montana law. It's also contrary to city ordinance once adopted. So that's kind of the plan of the administration, was to get this on the books so that everybody knows the rules. Elections are coming up again in November. I don't know if there's primaries or not, but we really need to get this on the books and have notice and let everybody discuss it.
Councilmember Closey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listening to your how you worded all this, to me, if the police chief wanted to run for mayor, he could because he would be his own boss. But if you go a step back to a reserve officer, answers mainly to the police chief rather than to the mayor, correct? So that would be a step back, and so there wouldn't be a direct.
Well, I think for purposes of the city, when we had to terminate reserves, it was always the mayor.
Yeah, the mayor would still be a direct supervisor over anybody in the city. Where you start losing some of that control and authority is you start getting back towards council and committees, commissions, and boards. The city councils, I cannot remember in 8 years any time the city councils had any discussion or any issue before them that dealt with city reserve officers. Can't think of one.
Appointment, I think, is the only.
Maybe appointments. City reserves are called out, what, a couple times a year?
Oh, it can vary on incident from incident.
Right,
You know,
but
so-
typically it's a couple of times, maybe.
Well, a reserve officer has a responsibility to give 8 hours minimum a month to the city for duty. That's in uniform, in jurisdiction. That can be more, but that's the minimum.
Right.
So-
And you're not paid anything.
No, the reserves receive two $60 stipends semi-annually a year for basically uniform improvements. Because it's not enough to replace one.
And that comes from the
City.
police chiefs.
That comes from the city. Yeah, the chief of police turns that into the clerk, and she then cuts the checks for those reserve officers that have met their qualifications for time given to the city, and then they receive $120 annually is what it amounts to. So, if I may,
Yes.
since I'm kind of the stick it in the wicket here, my grievance with this ordinance, the way it's written, I have no problem with anybody on any level working for the city not being in the capacity to have oversight of themselves. Hence, a volunteer fireman, an ambulance attendant, a reserve officer, whoever might volunteer for a board or commission, even if they're actually an employee of the city because workman's comp has provided them or something like that, should not be in a position like the mayor, because the mayor has oversight of personnel. My rub is, this is a volunteer community in which it has run for years, literally years, on the backs of the volunteers who make it work. You know, everything especially in our emergency services, is highly volunteered. I have a real problem if we tell somebody, oh, sorry, you can't run for city council because you're a volunteer fireman or a reserve police officer or something like that. And that's where my problem lies. I think the city council has to be an exempt. In the citations that were given, the second one from the Office of the City Attorney in Missoula, Montana, there was the description of a volunteer fireman who wanted to be on the city council, and it was decided that even as a volunteer fireman, he could not serve on the city council, that was a conflict of interest to do that. And so, I mean, I understand the city attorney's position. It is easier to defend something absolute than with exemptions in it. But I'm wondering if we as a body want this ordinance to rule out people who volunteer in this community in other capacities, don't have any desire to be the mayor, but would desire to be on the city council, from being able to hold both positions. And if we do, that's fine. I continue a letter of resignation to one or both entities that I'm a part of. But I just want to know that that's what we want before it becomes ordinance and law.
Councilmember Closey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Bruce. And if a person wanted to be on the city council, he's still outnumbered, like here, 7-1. So whatever he or she would request could be denied or overruled.
Anybody else like to weigh in and offer any suggestions, supports, opinion? Council President Eaton.
Thank you. If I'm looking at the same spot that, that was referenced when Council Vice Chair McGee spoke, it's the 1, 2, 3rd paragraph regarding the mayor of Stevensville at the time of election was also a fireman in the town's fire department. And so the mayor exercised authority for the fire chief, assistant chief, and all fire chiefs. And so at that time, in that position, he would have the authority to eliminate that position, et cetera, et cetera. The council votes as a body, and I don't see that we have direct authority over anybody that would serve as a volunteer. And so I don't know that this ordinance is worded, and let me just double check here, quickly scanning it, and I may be wrong, but I don't believe that it's worded that they would be eliminated, because they don't have oversight over a volunteer body. Am I correct?
Well, look at that sentence right there. So, let's see.
And which page were you looking at? Was this
Elected positions, since positions by elected officials incompatible.
were you referring to?
That's the.
3rd paragraph down, I think.
On
Yeah.
the Attorney General's May
On that.
4, 2018 letter?
Dear Mr.
No.
West, yeah.
Second, Councilmember McGee has pointed out to me that he's referencing the 2nd paragraph of the ordinance, saying, whereas Montana law specifically prohibits employees of a city, town, or county from serving in elected positions. And that's what his rub is.
I'm just gonna refer you to one section that you need to read. And I think it's helpful, and it kind of captures the problem with the law. The Missoula city attorney issued his opinion, I forget what it dealt with, a city employee serving as a council member. And if you go to page 2, is everybody with me on that? Page 2, there's a quote from the Supreme Court case. It's the 3rd paragraph from the bottom. Everybody see that? It says, the doctrine of incompatible public offices.
Got it.
That has this quote.
Got it.
If you read through that, the public policy concerns inherent in the simultaneous holding of multiple public offices or positions. Number 1, preventing multiple position holding so that the offices and positions of public trust do not accumulate in a single person. Preventing individuals from deriving, directly or indirectly, any pecuniary benefit by virtue of their dual position holding. Avoiding the inherent conflict which occurs when an employee's elected position has revisory power over the employee's superior in another position, and ensuing generally that public office holders and public employees discharge their duties with undivided loyalty. The one problem I've had with discussing any sort of volunteer is, what is a volunteer? If you're getting a stipend, you don't look like you're much of a volunteer. You're getting something for your service, and that is cash. This language makes it very clear that at a very minimum, if you're getting some sort of cash or benefit from serving in this position, then you probably shouldn't be holding 2 positions. That is the discussion they were having as to, can an employee get money and work and serve on the council. And the Missoula city attorney said, no, you can't under the Montana law. So the question is, under Montana law, when, does anybody know, when does a conflict of interest arise? It's when you take money, and I think it's anything above $25. And so you kind of have to be careful with any sort of a stipend, any sort of a monetary item that's passed to you for your position. What happens then? Well, I think obviously if this council decided that, okay, we're going to allow volunteer firemen, we're going to allow police reserves to serve dual capacities, at the very least, what you should consider is that if you are like Councilman McGee, you probably shouldn't vote on anything that has to do with the budget, because believe it or not, you're getting a stipend, and so that's going into your pocket. I think you would have to say, and tell everybody on the council what we know, by the way, I serve as a reserve officer and I do get a uniform stipend, and I'm not going to participate in this because it would result in a benefit to me. I think that would be a minimum requirement. So if you do start carving out certain exemptions for positions, we're going to have to look at each position and see what comes with that position, what kind of benefits are there. Again, I'm not telling you can't. I'm just telling you any of the positions you are interested in carving out, we need to look at each position and then form a process to deal with those. Like I said, if it's a reserve officer position, and the concern I would have would be, well, during the budget process, you probably don't need to vote on that portion which could end up in your pocket. And you declare that, and then you'd be fine. So a long-winded discussion, but going forward, I think the administration's open to discussing and considering certain positions, because you're right. The smaller the community, the harder it is to fill positions. Everybody knows that. Laurel has, luckily you have volunteers. And we're not trying to dissuade volunteers. We're just trying to say, if you're an employee, you got to consider if you're going to run for office, you may want to give up your job or have to give up your job if you win. That's what we're saying.
Councilmember Sparks.
So here's my thoughts on it. I think it's relatively easy to define what an employee is. Even if we put in there an employee is working X number of hours a week for the city. And I 100% agree that an employee, where this is part or full-time employment, should not be serving in elected positions like the mayor or on city council because of the oversight. There's a checks and balance that's involved there, and I think it's incredibly inappropriate for them to be the checks and the balance on those positions. I think it's very much a gray area when it comes to the volunteers that we have, the police reserves, the ambulance, the fire, and any other volunteers within the community. Can it be, so this is my question for you, Sam, can you write something, or are we allowed to write something into the ordinance regarding like mandatory recusals on situations or items that come before the council involving the department in which they volunteer for? So if there's, for example, a fire department either within the budget or an issue that comes before the council with the fire department, if we had a volunteer firefighter on the council, it would be written into that they can serve, but anything like that would have to be an automatic recusal from that situation.
I don't think you'd have to include it in the ordinance because it's already in the law. You would have an obvious conflict of interest, and when a conflict of interest arises, you as a council person has to stand up and point out and divulge that you do have a conflict of interest, and this is what it is. And if necessary, you may not participate in the discussion and the vote. So
Right.
that's already in the law. So it would really depend upon what positions you're thinking. And we could look at each position and what comes with which one.
So I'm particularly focused on the volunteer aspect because we are a volunteer community. So I think if we were to clarify within the ordinance itself that a current employee being someone who is employed X number of hours a week or whatever, would fall under the employee category of being ineligible to serve on, as mayor, city council, on the special committees, etc. I think we can put in there that volunteers are allowed and maybe call it out and reference the Montana law that it, you know, when the conflict of interest arises with their volunteer position, that it's with the stipulation of recusal or something to that. I don't know, whatever legal terminology you want to put on it, but you know what I'm saying? So that the volunteers still can serve in those capacities, maybe with the exception of mayor, since the mayor still has oversight of those volunteer positions at the end of the day, but that the exception is that volunteers within our community can serve on committees and council, with the exception of recusal when it comes to a conflict of interest or something to that effect.
So what I hear you saying is the ordinance would work with a definition added as to who is an employee or what constitutes an
Right.
employee. I could add a definition section.
And I think that would take care of the issue with the volunteer situation. Just a thought.
And I would assume that if that was what the council decided on and say for a conversation passed that ordinance with that type of exception, and that's something that a future council with a future city of Laurel with a different type of department, probably a full-time fire department and a different type of perhaps ambulance service, then could look at making changes to that because of the unnecessary need for that to tap into those volunteers that they wouldn't have, because obviously at some point in the growth of the city you start losing that either by law or by necessity and moving towards more paid departments or functions within that those emergency services. Councilmember Wilkie.
Well, I'd like to ask, the position we hold here as council members, does that forbid us from serving on the police commission because we're elected officials?
Yeah, read the ordinance.
What?
It wouldn't, if it would have this ordinance passed, read the ordinance.
Yep, that's, if you're asking if Montana law prohibits a council person from serving on the police commission, the answer is no. We haven't been able to locate anything that says that in the law.
Okay, that's my question.
That being said, however, if you read the intention of the law, the police commission are supposed to be community members, not
Council members.
council members.
Elected
That's
officials.
because you want a pure resident commission overseeing your police. And I shouldn't say oversee, they have specific duties.
Right.
I don't know, I don't think it's a good idea to mix and have city council elected positions sitting in the commission seats. I would not recommend that.
Answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a question for you, Sam. What's the difference between a stipend and a salary?
I don't think there's much difference to it, because both of them are taxed. They're taxed differently, however. Along with the stipend, they're usually for a specific purpose, such as clothing, equipment, something like that, along those lines. A salary is more, you're paid for your actual service.
And a stipend would be more for reimbursement than it would be for salary.
Kind of to offset your cost. I would agree with that. The gray area that I don't want to get into is when your stipend may be an hourly thing. that's a whole different discussion, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, in the case of the volunteer fire department, that the stipend was originally designed, or at least in the modern era of the city, to help offset the wear and tear on your vehicle getting to and from the fire department on a call. And that was something that you were going to, it was going to cost you something eventually, traveling to and from the station, which could be twice a day, once a day, could be once a day, every day, could be 3 times a week, just depends on how many calls came out and how available you were. So I know there's, and I know some stipends were dependent on different types of functions you may be doing as a volunteer, which is still true today, especially with the volunteer ambulance department. So you might get a certain amount of stipend for being available for a call, and another stipend for actually going out on a call, and another stipend for actually going on a call and actually going into billings and taking a patient into the hospital. So, Councilmember McGee.
So while we're on this point, to be clear, the distinction between employee and non-employees, because as city council members, we receive money on the council here, but we don't receive the benefit of insurance like workman's comp. The difference in the other volunteers we're talking about is that the workman's comp is provided all of them. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yeah. Whoops.
And liability insurance is paid on them as well. So. Any other questions on the proposed ordinance?
Sounds like I can adjust it and send it out through you.
Yeah, we can do that. You can look at it. If you don't like what we've presented, then we can table it to the next meeting again and talk about it one more time. If you think that's necessary, or you can always make an amendment to slightly tweak it too while you're bringing that up for to approve the motion, as you've done in the past. Any questions on that? It's not midnight yet.
Time to burn it away there.
All right, with that, we will move on. The one thing I would like to give kudos to this council, and hopefully the whole city at large, is we've tried to, I think, tackle some things that need to be looked at, and we spent more time than probably this council has ever spent, that I can remember, in meetings that are not brought forth. So I think it's good, and I hope with a lot more of this kind of work that we can plow through a lot more things that need to be done. And if there's something that you would like to look at, that you would like to check an ordinance or make a change, let me know, and I can direct my staff to, when they have the available time, depending on the severity or the time sensitivity or whatever may be on an ordinance. But we'll work on that and bring it to you. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at or should be thinking about, and when we do, it's bring them forward. With that, we will move on to other items. And other items, I really have nothing on the schedule. I do have a quick statement that I'm going to read to everyone from myself. And that is that the city CAO, Matthew Lurker, worked for the city of Laurel for nearly a year. During that time, Mr. Lurker did his best to fulfill his responsibilities. And it had come to a point where both the CAO and myself had different expectations of each other, which led to the hard decision for us to dissolve our professional relationship. So as of today, Mr. Lurker is no longer an employee of the city of Laurel, and we as the city administration wish the best for Mr. Lurker in the future. So, pass that along to everybody. And with that, we will move on to the review of the draft council agenda, which is going to change slightly. We've discussed some of those changes. One will be gone. The one that's staying will have the ordinance number from the one I believe that'll be gone. And a couple will have a slightly different language. Attendance at the upcoming council meeting for the, what is that? For the second?
April 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anybody not going to be there? All right. Moving on, announcements. We'll start with Councilmember Closey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week I announced that House Bill 285, which was a bill presented to the House by Representative Vince Rickey, which would rename a 1 mile section of Buffalo Trail Road from mile marker 1 to mile marker 2, passed the House last month 98-2. Last Thursday, that bill was heard in the Senate, and that also passed the Senate committee. They told us that we had a bill passed and that it would be presented to the governor for signing. And we asked Representative Rickey to request a photo op with the governor when he signs that bill. And so when Mr. Rickey lets me know the time or the date for that, usually it's around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but when he lets me know the date, I'll be passing that along to everybody that the bill has passed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. That's great news. So we're looking forward to finding out when that will be, and we'll try to get as many people up in Helena for that as we can.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Monsieur.
I have nothing, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Wilkie.
I have nothing, sir. Thank you.
Council Vice President McGee.
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurd.
I have nothing.
Council President Eaton.
I just want to thank Council President McGee for creating an epic meeting here.
Good. Happy to do so.
That's all I have.
Is that all you have? Thanking him for the epic meeting.
Yes.
Well, it was good. I enjoyed it. It was robust. Councilmember Sparks.
Just that I missed you guys so much last week when I was in sunny Arizona. And I'm gonna consider this my punishment for missing last week's meeting, that we basically did 2 meetings in one. So thanks for that.
So what I understand is the new form of punishment for missing a meeting is an extended meeting when you return.
That'll teach you.
I'm sure that'll affect all of us at one point in time or another. So with that, we will conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.